Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. When you go back and look at all these traditions and see these correlations, and you realize that the one thing that did connect everybody was the observation of the movement of the stars and the constellations, and how that correlated with consciousness and the movement of sort of the inner zodiac. And when you bring all that out, it really clears up a lot of misunderstanding that we see in religion and that we see in even modern mysticism and spirituality or whatever. And hopefully also science. I mean, even you were talking about science, and we've spoken about this before, that there is a role for the scientific world, being that it's something that's measuring the materialistic realm and bringing about these different technological aids and things like that. And that can be either malignant or it can be a positive thing. And it's the same all around. I mean, each aspect has its role. We need an analyzation externally. We need some kind of scientific process. Then we also need that inner world, which would be like spirituality and religion, but we need that to be cleared up, and definitely the journey of the self and whatnot, and the connection to the natural world. So really it comes back to where we started, where we're talking about balancing out these different spheres so that they're in the right place, doing the right role. When one of these roles becomes it tries to encapsulate everything, which is what's happening in mainstream science, where they're trying to answer everything and just throw all the spiritual inner work out the window, then they themselves become just as malignant as any kind of religion would have when they went in the extreme in a different direction. So the idea here is to try to heal that and synthesize it better so that each has its function, and we understand the differences between each one and how we balance out all of those things.
Exactly, and we talked earlier about if a man is cut off from his cultural roots, his history, he has no chance of doing that. So the malignant forces are definitely doing that. They're helping people to be severed from their racial and cultural roots, to make those into Orwellian bad words, bad terms, and we're falling for it, and it's not just going to affect the culture, it affects individuals. Just like we said, most people today probably do think of their life as just empty and meaningless. They're not aware that it's the way that they've been doing things. They're not aware of the remedies. They're certainly not aware, like Joseph Campbell spoke about that, and Carl Jung did, as well, that there's a mythic level under this. And I'll be talking about that more when we get to the Wheel of Fortune, and talking about my forthcoming book that deals with that, taking the tarot down a step into people's personal charts and stuff like that, because that's what a chart is. A chart, right, is, because remember, time, there's a whole question of whether time itself is even cyclical, because our clocks, even the zodiac, the calendar, all makes it look like time, goes around in circles and recurs. But we've just been talking earlier about the will, which is an endlessly flowing process, which implies that it's sort of linear, or at least omnidirectional. It doesn't really tell us that something starts and then goes back on itself. So why did we create those rounds? Why did we create those cycles? And we did it for good reason. Because even though time itself is not particularly linear, not particularly cyclical, we need to, what we do is we reckon it that way for good reasons. We hypotheticalize it because we have these things called rites of passage. They're mythical, they're mysterious, they're part of this pre-conscious knowing. But what the zodiac is, what a chart is, you see, is the ability to know what these rites of passages are. These are the moments of where we really mature, when we really know what's going on. Imagine for a moment, there are moments when you're walking and something bubbles up, you come to a pool or a fountain in which something's bubbling up there. That is a moment when the pre-conscious reservoir makes itself known and gives you a chalice and says, now is the time for you to sup on this or drink on this. There's a big mythical thing happening. And it may be seconds. Some people have described those moments that they've happened, they're almost out of time. Others say it lasted for years. And there's many of them. And some last long, some last short. Some are intense and agonizing, and others are ecstatic, right? And we need to have a kind of consciousness that accepts them all, like we said earlier about the inability to deal with the legitimate anxiety. So what a chart shows is when these kinds of rites of passages are going to come up, what you need to be wearing, so to speak, or doing, to make the best of it, and what kind of craziness you might do, which is kind of stupid, which we should warn you against, so that you know more about it. Hey, this rite of passage is going to coincide with the coming together of a relationship, or hey, it's going to come together with the ending of a relationship. So don't be throwing yourself or her out of the window. Get it? Right. Okay, move on. And then you start dealing with all of these many rites of passage, which are shown in the chart. Once you create this cycle out of it, they're called cycles, or whatever, the rites of passage. And so it doesn't really matter if you see them as being on a linear structure of time, or, as we prefer, somehow the human race has designed it where we have these recurring cycles. It's just interesting. There's nothing much you can do about it. It's all up to you to, it's just like looking at the pulse or the wave. People can look at whatever way they do. And so the zodiac and the tarot, those are the bona fide, age-old, sanctified by time. These are the ways that we look into how to get people back onto the track of their inner chronology, onto who they are. Remember we talked about in the Path of the Fool very briefly about Swala de Lubitsch and the whole idea that, look, we don't even, forget about time being linear or circular, we don't know if even we've devolved, right? Even in our conversation now, we've been assuming that, when we talk about the pre-conscious stages of being, I know a lot of people listening are still thinking about some swamp, some still thinking in terms of some mud, even God, we're all come out of this black. Anytime you mention unconscious, or anytime you mention, earlier states of consciousness, we're so contaminated with ideas. And Swala de Lubitsch tried his best to say, well, there could be a chance that there hasn't been an ascent. It's really wrong to use these terms anyway, but since we have to use them, it may not have even been an ascent. It may have been a fucking descent from even pure higher forms of consciousness. So again, there's another one of those ideas that, it takes time to sit back and, whoa, hold on. You just give me shelling and now what the hell is this? Yeah, but what I say about that is, look, even if we are devolved beings, we still are coming from a pre-conscious reservoir. That doesn't change. All that changes is your perspective of it, right? You're still coming from a pre-conscious reservoir, which you can't get to grips with. So if it was an ascent, well, then you still have that history. And if it was a descent, you still have that history. So one way, really, it doesn't change. Now, if you look at the Hermit, he's, two paths came up, didn't he? There's two paths up and down from the mountain. That's what we're talking about. So you can either see it as an ascent, or you can see it as some sort of descent. He's hit the mountain from above and he's about to go down further into the world, or he's ascended to it from below. It really doesn't matter. The mountain works as a symbol in a way, for both of those concepts. It doesn't really affect us at the end of the day because we're here where we are. And it doesn't change the fact that pre-conscious reservoir exists, and there must be a semi-permeable membrane between us and that place, and that's what Blake called the imagination. Hegel maybe called it the Geist. Bergson called it the Elan Vital. The Logos, whatever and as I said before, it's not you so much speaking to it, it's about it speaking to you constantly, but you're deafened to it. And working with the shadow, working with the body, is one of the best ways to open your antenna so that you can hear its voice more. Getting into nature, of course, knowing that you have a vocation that's not given to you by people, but it's given to you by culture, it's given to you by the will towards your culture, so get on with it. So you won't be depressed, you won't be feeling your life is meaningless. When you hear somebody like me say that, and you're able to say, yeah, I got it, that's right, I'm going to get on with that. It doesn't matter what people think or say, I understand that you're right. This is what I've been looking for my whole life. I meant to be an author, I meant to be a teacher, I meant to be a swimming instructor, I meant to be a ranger, a forest ranger, but I know why I'm doing it now. It's not just to pay the rent, it's not just to impress somebody, it's because I have to do this vocationally. See, when there's these small stones in the shoe that stop you climbing the mountain, you can't even get to the garden gate, yet every single person has got ideas of being great and climbing the mountain and being the best, but they can't take the stone out of the shoe that stops them getting past the garden gate. My work is all about that. My work is just all about trying to get that stone out of your shoe, and the rest is yours. The world is yours. The world is absolutely yours, just like the Motorhead album says, the world is yours. Go and attain it. But to do that, you have to deconstruct all the things that prevent you from doing it. And really, it's not nature that's stopping you. It's not even half yourself. Within yourself is the desire to do it, isn't it? So what is it? It's culture. For the most part, the evils, the obstructions, the negations is cultural. And so you have to then listen to what Schelling and Hegel and these people are saying. You do have to contribute to your culture. You do. Because when you see what the evil is, the next thing is to do something about it. And so that's ontological. Nobody had to tell you that. Once you see it, I have evil thoughts within. I'm not a good person. I don't feel right. Hey, I think I'm even one of these people that they're talking about that's evil. Yeah, do you know how precious it is to be evil? You'd think that was a crazy statement, right? Until you know what I'm talking about. Well, what does a good man got to worry about? He can sit on the park bench and feed the pigeons for all he matters. The salvation of the world is in the hands of the evil person. When you really know what you're looking at, when you really come to your senses, because it is within him that he is experiencing what it means to be torn apart, having all sorts of evil feelings. And it is within his power, whether he exercises it or not is a moot point, but it is within his power to locate and track the reasons why he feels that way. Now, granted, if he doesn't do it and he ends up in solitary confinement, right, or the world's worst serial killer, he's in the encyclopedia of, well, okay, that's the way he chose and it's the wrong way. But beside all of that, it is the man who is falling apart. It is the man who knows that something's wrong within his body politic, who's in the prime and perfect position because he's so intimately aware of what evil is. Then in some sort of Dostoevsky, Kafka-esque way, he's coming to grips with what it is. I wouldn't go so far as to, say that you need to be like a Marquis de Sade, but somewhere in the middle. The man who is inclined to feel damaged within, that that he feels that he doesn't care about others, and he knows that something's wrong. He bloody well does know that something's wrong, because he's the one tied up in knots about it. It takes a lot to go and commit the crimes that a lot of people do, right? So they're tied up in knots. But the thing that's good in that evil is that they know evil, and they know that something's wrong. And therefore they're closer to be able to track its roots to the cause and end it. But we live in a culture where we don't help the evil people that way. We don't give them any paradigm. So then how are we any less evil? You see how it folds back on itself? The good man is not as good as the one-eyed Jack. The guy sitting on the park bench saying, it's got nothing to do with me, is actually in his own way tarnished. Because he hasn't helped the culture get to the point where if and when evil people, be they young children, who go about just pulling leaves off trees and stamping on animals and stamping on insects and just these little horrors, and growing up to be even worse. But they don't live in a culture that's saying, if you feel this way and you know that something's wrong, here's what you need to be able to do. We rely on you to locate the source of this. And what I mean is the parents. What I mean is the culture. We need to provide a system by which the evil man can, in the more constructive moments of his life, and believe me, these do exist. They exist later after rehabilitation, after the damage is done, then they all regret it and say, yeah, well, I'm really changed now. Yeah, but we should be in there before that can happen. Not in some Orwellian way, but in a very benign way in which we say evil is a good thing. Because by having these problems within, and this is basically essentially what the Hegels of the world were talking about, that there is the problem. So stick with the problem. Stick in the venue of the problem. And then from the evil comes the greatest good. Because now you can discover the causes. And the causes are 9 times out of 10 cultural.
It's like when you're trying to heal your body from being sick, like you have to go through that process of identifying that whatever's causing that illness and then flushing it out. And that's the hardest part. But if you just remain ignorant of it, and then you're going to be victim to it, and you won't be able to change that situation for the better. Exactly,
well said. Because the process then takes over. If you don't give the person the right tools in the early days when he's feeling that way, eventually he'll succumb. And unfortunately, the drives, or whatever you want to call them, the urges, there's nothing really inhibiting it. Well, there is something inhibiting it, but that's just a draconian police system, court system, and that doesn't really fix anybody because the damage is all way done. And then the person just into justification of what they've done, or they just try to milk the system in a cunning and manipulative way. We all know that that's evil, as we know. We don't have to be told. It's in the papers every day. But what we're talking about on a deeper level isn't in the papers every day, and it's a much more holistic system. And there were people and teachers who were onto this. And basically what it means is that you stay close to what is malignant, because then you can track it back to the cultural roots. It's like I have this quote that says, every fool can ask the big questions of philosophy, but only a philosopher can find the answers to them. So we've got to turn fools into philosophers. And that's our agenda for culture. And if there are people who don't feel right within, there is something going on deeply inside, there is self-sadism, then that self-sadism becomes sadism towards others or towards animals. We need to be able to constructively help those people to say, you have a great role in life. You have a great role. You are a walking laboratory. And we're not going to work with you phenomenologically, to find out and deconstruct why you have these urges, why you feel this way, what's wrong with the world, why do you feel that you hate everything in the world, why is everything just stinks, and go, the whole process, get into it and find out. And my God, that will be so sanitizing. So our answers are in evil. Like I said before, evil contains within it the seeds of its own destruction, but it also contains something else within it, the seeds of greater creation. So these are the things that need to be taught to children, taught to ourselves. We learn these every day, so that even in us, even in good people, you have moments, don't you, when there's evil urges and all sorts of frustrations and what have you. We need to do the same thing inside. It's not just this black and white, like, oh, there's all the good people and these evil fuckers over there. No, each person has within them these particular urges and impulses and desires, and they're perfectly organic and they're perfectly natural, because those are the echoes of our culture, which is definitely malignant. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work that out. Our cultures are terribly, terribly malignant. They're producing malignant people by the day. But so they are creating malignant people, right, that's the end of the scale, and you need to go to those people, and within their hands is the solution. Absolutely. It's not going to come from on high. It's not going to come from some supernatural force. It's not going to come from some wise Albert Einstein who's going to crack it, and it's all going to happen. It's all going to, everyone's just going to go, wow, gee, he banished evil from the world like some Pied Piper. No, it's going to come from within the evil person. Because evil is a particular thing. It's a very interesting thing to study. As I've said throughout my work, the only person who can bring the greatest good into the world is those who are fully conversant with the nature of evil. There is absolutely no other way. And so we need to be very close to the evil within us. Let's use a better word, the immorality within us, or the moments when we are not operating with, in light of the greater will, the supernal will, God's will, if you will. We're not working with that. We're out of sync with that. We want to know why. If there's a kink in the wire, there's a reason for that kink. Something's out. It's just as simple as that. And creative people know. If you're trying to tune an instrument, yeah, well, you're capable of doing it. You are capable. You have within you the ear to know what to be in tune is. The instrument didn't give you that. You're tuning the instrument. But the instrument is not the instrument telling you what the correct harmonization of all the notes is. You have that internally. That's part of your biology, let alone your mind. So we have a metaphysical, archetypal grasping of what truth is. If we didn't, it would be pointless. Then you would be living in what people claim that Hegel is saying, which is a draconian enforced order. Well, first, he wasn't saying that, and secondly, we're not living in that. We never will. Culture and civilization will always survive as long as we are, aware that we have an inner grasping of the logos. And so it's like, as I say, when you're tuning the instrument, you have an inner understanding what harmony is. So you can know that the C's and the D's are, I don't know how to explain it, but when they're all in harmony, you know it. You know when your body's moving and flowing, right, in martial arts or whatever, in a correct way. You just know, and you know when it bloody well isn't, right? When you feel kinks, or you feel the pain, or you feel all these spasms or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
So you have an inner template of wholeness. And that is because you're in a perfect system called the universe. And by God, that universe is definitely resonating with your thought, but it's not just resonating with your thought. This is where the rationalists and even the idealists and even the scientists go wrong. There's other things happening within you. There's memory, there's moods. There's moods behind the moods. There's the body, there's the cells. The universe is speaking to you on all those levels, and we only hear it very faintly on one level, say the rational. Well, William Blake was saying, are you people crazy? This thing is talking to you all the time. Everywhere you move, everything you do is in harmony with the pleroma or the noumena around you. And you have to be constantly in touch with that. And if and when an aberration should come in the garden, right? People or yourself have these moments where things are definitely out of kilter. You've got to find out the origins of why that is off. Well, we've already spoken about most of them. If your homeostasis is off, as we said, it's probably because of the junk food or the alcohol, or again, it relates to culture, isn't it? If the biological parasympathetic is off, that's usually got to do with trauma. Trauma inflicted upon you by teachers or parents or, whatever other source it might have been. Again, we're back to, the culture. If it is psychic, it will still relate to the culture. If it's mental, it will probably still relate to the culture. So these things can be fixed. And my work deals in the great specialists, the Otto Ranks, the Ludwig Biddenswangers, the existential schools of both philosophy and psychology. that have brilliant ways for people to attend to these malignancies, whether it's in themselves or within culture. Nothing needs to be invented. It's all there. Many things we have failed to implement that have already been on the books. Other things are on the books but have never even been initiated. You know, like for instance, Ayn Rand. She said, look, civilization demonstrably progressed and became civilization when church and state were divided. That's how you got America. That's how you got Britain. That's how you got Canada. That's how you got Australia. That's how you got the progressive, most progressive places. And where you don't have the division of church and state, yeah, okay. Then she said that's half of man's journey towards complete freedom. Now you got to move to the next step and separate state and economics. Has that been done yet, even in America? Nope, not even close. No. So the state, the government, the federal system still is involved in people selling their products, selling their apples, you know, teaching their practices. No, you got the state in there. What the hell has the state got to do with economics, she says? We've separated church and state. Let's separate state and economics. It's very simple. It's on the books. It can easily be done. Just because the founding fathers didn't do it doesn't mean we can't get there now. Let's go. Well, nobody listened. So look at the mess of the world. And then after that, there's other ones as well. So nothing needs to be reinvented. It's all there. If you don't want to implement it, then expect disaster, which is what we're getting. And so this works on the cellular level. It works on the mental, emotional level. There's solutions for absolutely everything. That's what wise men were all about. And the mystery of wise men, or the mentality, the mentation of those wise men and women, their creations, be it in music or poetry or mysticism or religion, whatever it might have been, philosophy, is still there. It doesn't go away. That's what history is. History is the most living thing there is. When I talk about that pre-conscious reservoir, that thing is heaving. That thing is alive. And you are in touch with it. But if those senses that connect you to it, like the imagination, have been shut down by parents, by society, well, then we're in disaster mode. And so we need to get into a culture that opens those gates again. Like he said, open the doors of perception. And when they are, hey, we have an incredible noumena there that to inform us, to instruct us. And so even though the hermit knows the limits of how far his light can go, but within those limits, there's still an infiniteness. There's still an incredible ebb and flow, right? And there's so much for him to digest and work out and bring down from the mountain into the world. You know, and that's each and every one of us is that hermit. Each and every one of us is a channel to bring down either tyranny, more reasons for tyranny, or more doctrines of freedom. It's all based on the individual and how they themselves have not only manipulate their own will, but how they've synchronized their personal will, the human will, with the divine will. It's all based on that.
Wow, it's we could probably do a whole analysis of just that whole concept alone. I mean, you've done this in the past about the origins of evil and getting into some of the aspects of it. But when we get into the deep down reservoirs of where that exists, the potential for that exists in everybody, just like the potential for disease or health exists in everybody, right? Then you start to realize that, you know, this isn't something you're a victim to. It's something you always have a choice in, but there are things that you have to do to get there. There are stages you have to go through. And going on this path is going to be full of all kinds of perils and obstacles that you're going to have to overcome. And there is one question that you were bringing up in the Hermit card about, does life work more for the wise man or for the fool? You know, mm-hmm. Is it designed to work more in one way or the other? Is that something that we determine ourselves? Maybe you just wanted to finish off on that point.
Yeah, well, that is a huge question. And it connects also with another one, and that is that it seems to be, when you look at time, when you look at the past, it seems that all the errors that man could ever make are repeated by the next generation. Very little, if any, of the wisdom. And I'm not satisfied with that. So my personal, you know, and I know this is the case for you as well, but it's very important for us to be able to articulate it. And that is, my job is to not sit okay with that. I don't want the errors to be repeated endlessly. Even I know that that may be the fact of the matter. I resist it. I'm against that fact. I think that the wisdom of the past is what should be repeated. And I don't give a damn about David Cameron or that fucking thing that's in the White House right now. I don't care about them, right? We're more powerful than them because we're aligned with the wisdom of ages. And, you know, I try to bring the work of the greats to my audience, you know, and also scrape away some of the lies that some of these filthy rats have put around these men. You know, it's not good for me. I don't like it when these people of the past have been misinterpreted. I'll tell you where I think they were wrong, and I'll also tell you where they were right, and I'll tell you where they were misinterpreted. And I expect my audience to give me the time and the space to think about it because it's for their good. You know, and that way, that's my contribution to culture. And that's very self-reflexive, because the more you do for your culture, even though there may be a lot of failings in it, and often feelings of depression, but there's also a great deal of satisfaction from it. And it's not really even if other people are telling you that they're getting, good out of it. That's nice to have, but that's not what I mean. I mean just the act of doing it has its own reward. And so these other people go, but sure, you got 100 different people working for you, like you're really successful. They haven't a clue. I don't, number one, and I don't even really need it, because I'm getting out of this what I need, because it is holistic, it is vocational. I'm equally okay if other people come along for the ride and share this journey. That's a beautiful cultural aspect of it as well. But you see, I'm not victimized by that. So, yeah, there is a error. Somebody can look at it and say, I'm depressed by that. I just don't want to know about it. I certainly cannot do what you're doing, Michael. I can't do it. It's just terrible to look at the error that's being repeated and repeated and repeated. But see, where that person gets disenchanted, I get enthused. I say, yeah, but that's a horrible, like I said, in the evil is the answer, isn't it? I see that as an evil, and I want to do something about it. I don't just let it stand. That's a sign of tremendous weakness and unheroic behavior. It's not right to do that, because you're also desecrating the optimism and the journey of the ones before you. If they had all thought like that, we wouldn't have a culture at all. The fact that we've got any kind of culture, bad as it is because people didn't think like that. And they continued to write those books under great pain and want and cold and misery and poverty. Right? And they did what we're talking about, contributed to their culture. And they were given, even they may not have had any money in the bank, they had awesome reservoirs, of wisdom and contentment within, because they knew that they were doing this. And so my job is to try and turn people onto that, of all age groups. I don't care if they're young listening or they're old, that's irrelevant, or from the East or from the West. You have a duty to maintain the culture and the traditions, and then to improve them, because they're not all just perfect. Some of them are needing a lot of polishing. Some of them need a lot of changing. And so we have a duty to do that. But by God, that's full employment. And even if change isn't put into your pocket, like the hangman, you see the coins pouring out of his jacket and they're on the floor, but he's got a smile on his lips anyway. Why? It's exactly what I'm saying. He's fulfilled, the higher aspect of that card anyway. There's a lot of negatives in that card, but the positive aspect is, hey, I don't care. I'm not put out. I know what my job is. I'm dutiful, and I'm doing it. Even though you may think I'm suffering pain, I'm suffering want, I'm suffering loss. Yeah, but I'm doing what is right, and I'm in my own way bringing treasures of another kind, treasures that are not just coins and material goods and gold and all that rubbish, that people are accumulating. There's treasures, vast treasures of another kind. And those are found in your culture, and they're also found in nature. And they're also found in the inner house as well. That's why I say man is an existential trinity, and he is more than just what he thinks he is. And when he's doing his duty, shall we say, and he's interlocking properly, or his will is operating, flowing in and out of those three realms, inner, outer, and the cultural, then he's a complete being. When any one or more than one of those particular spheres of operation are banjaxed or dysfunctional, then man himself, right, his eigenwelt can't be healthy or holistic. So right now we have forces in every corner of the world trying to get you to de-racialize and deculturize yourself. And I'm always interested in the underlying reasons why that is. And so if you see that is happening, well, I'm sorry, you have to step up and you have to do the opposite. You know what I mean? And that involves, as we said, physical work on your body and cultural work and a tremendous new relationship rapport with nature. And all of these things are required.
I couldn't agree more. And as you were talking there, it reminded me of that great passage from the Oracle of Delphi where they were talking about within you is hidden the treasure of treasures. Know thyself and you will know the universe and the gods. And that statement has always really hit me in a very resonant way, because the more that we've gone on this track of analyzing just on this series of the Path of the Fool, and then going into all the psychology and studying the sociological aspects and the political aspects. And, I personally have gone from, like zero to hero, just going on this track of looking at all of these different things and then reflecting back and finding what those treasures are really all about. And from that sense of knowing that even if you don't always know the way, and many times you are going to feel lost in the forest, and many times there's many things you can't maybe know right off the bat. But what I've always gleaned from all of this is that you gain a sense of confidence over time, that you can handle whatever forces come your way. You can handle whatever kind of obstacles are going to get thrown in front of you. You trust yourself to be able to deal with that because you've connected to your inner house and your inner sense of knowing. You've done that shadow work. And, even if you have failings in the future, or even if you stumble here and there, you trust yourself, you love yourself enough, you know yourself enough that you can pick yourself up and get back on that track. And I've done it countless times in my own life. I anticipate it happening continuously. And with that kind of mindset, that your mind is bulletproof, and you're not going to have your mind given over to toxic ideologies, or just following along with the herd because that's what everybody else is doing, or giving up your rights and your freedoms, or allowing other people's rights and freedoms to be diminished. You're not going to be living in that mindset anymore. You're going to rise above that and express, the true nature of who you really are, and bring forward your own potential in the world. So I appreciate doing this series and analyzing these cards from all these different eclectic points, because it's very, very valuable in the big scheme of things when you're talking about your own direction and your own path that you're walking in life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a good place to leave it.
Well, let's also maybe finish off just quickly. What's the next card coming up? And do you want to give people a little teaser on that?
Yeah, the Wheel of Fortune is a tremendously interesting card. It's often marginalized or just abbreviated, well, obviously it represents the sun. Obviously it represents the zodiac itself. Obviously it represents a clock face, time. That's why I've been laboring, through the series to talk about those subjects of time and cycles and fate as well. And it comes up as a reminder, the Wheel of Fortune, to step back again and look at the idea that it is a process, a never-ending process, because otherwise you might get too fixated on the idea of the cycle of time, because if a wheel moves, it spins. Yeah, if you roll a wheel, it makes a straight line. So even though it's a wheel, implied within the movement of a wheel is a linear process, actually. So it's kind of a paradox. And then if you focus in on the hub of the wheel, you have another perspective, sort of like I said, the Hermit is the wheel from above, right? If you go upwards, look at the mountain, it is actually a kind of a wheel in a way, and the Hermit then makes the center of the wheel. So I'm probably going to get into the fact of the chart, the personal chart, which we've been talking in very broad terms through the series, symbolically, theosophically, astrotheologically. I'd like to take it down a step and remind people of, astrological charts, tarot charts. I have my own system, obviously, as taught on the Mystery School. Might get into talking a bit about that. I have a forthcoming book early next year, which again deals with this more practical application, showing people easy spreads, easy way to get into the tarot by using their own astrological chart. Got my own particular way of doing that. Some of those systems are taught on the Mystery School, but I have other elaborate systems. And so we might get into a bit of that on the Wheel of Fortune, just to bring out again some of the more practical aspects, because we've been doing this really heady stuff, even on this interview. It's very philosophical, and it's nice sometimes to, change the pace. And we're going to need to as well, because then we move on to justice and hangman. We're going to be back into very, very deep esoteric matters. By the time we get to hangman and death, we'll even be dealing a lot more with this whole parasympathetic, sympathetic, the body, how the body features, how the shadow work really entails the body. We'll probably be getting into more about that. I think not too sure. You know, it's still a little bit up in the air, but I know that it will be quite heady again. So the Wheel of Fortune will be sort of stepping back and looking at it at a little bit different perspective. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I definitely look forward to it. I thoroughly enjoy doing these interviews and looking at these subjects, and I appreciate your time, Michael. And
You bet.
we'll definitely follow up in the future.
We will do. Thanks for the opportunity, Dave.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
my pleasure. Anytime. And thanks to all those that are listening and supporting this work, for those that have supported my channel and the show that I do, and also those that are supporting what Michael's doing, and many other great people out there that are really trying to bring this information to the fore in this time. So I just want to thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you again next time.